I'm back! Okay, welcome back to another season of Office Hours with the Professor, the show where I say things. This fall, we're going to be revisiting the endlessly fascinating Ket people of central northern Siberia. Now, I thought that, first of all, it would be a good idea to review what we already know about Ket culture and life. Now, I did a video series on these people a long time ago, but to be honest, it was pretty cringeworthy because I kept stammering and pausing, and also it didn't have cool stuff like my awesome title card. So let's start by asking what I get asked a lot. What is Ket and why is it so important? Now, to answer this question, we need to take this epic journey across space and time, deep into the heart of Siberia. Hey, excuse me. Here we go. Excuse me. Now, if you ask around about Siberia, most people will say two things. Number one, it's cold. And number two, it's where Stalin sends you if you make him mad. I'm mad Stalin. There we go. But there's actually a lot more, although these are true, there's actually a lot more to this part of the world that's really cool and fun to learn about. Siberia is even home to its own indigenous people, absolutely unrelated to the Russians or the Chinese. These, although, of course, politically right now they belong to the Russian Federation. Now, these Aboriginal Siberians are really diverse, just like the native peoples of the Americas or Australia. These people have been in Siberia speaking their own language and maintaining their own cultures for thousands and thousands of years before the Russians even showed up. And here's where my eraser is. Good. Okay, now these are nomadic tribal cultures that, because of their remoteness, we just don't hear very much about. One of these tribes is known, or one of these peoples is known as Kets. And these Ket are important because their culture and language are really special, and they have a lot to teach us in the fields of linguistics and anthropology, even surrounded as they are by many other interesting cultures and languages. For one thing, it's much more ancient. This Ket culture and this Ket language is much more ancient than any of the other languages around it. For another thing, Ket bears this uncanny similarity to some of the languages, the native languages of North America. Some of the native languages of North America have this uncanny, strange similarity with Ket. So incredibly, it's looking more and more like Ket represents one branch of this ancestral population that went on to migrate from Siberia to the Americas, and Ket represents the branch that stayed in Siberia. Now, unfortunately, young people are no longer learning this interesting and ancient Ket language, and within the next few years, it will probably have gone extinct as a primary medium of communication. The native peoples of Siberia have, sadly, they've run into a lot of problems in modern history, and the Ket are no exception. Again, this parallels the challenges faced by indigenous peoples around the world, in America, in Australia, and it's among these are, we have crime, we have poverty, we have substance abuse, lots of really nasty stuff. And a history of economic exploitation and forced assimilation exists or has existed under the Russians, particularly under the Soviet regime, for not just the Ket, but for many of these native peoples. And as a result, a lot of the traditional culture and knowledge was lost in the 20th century. Okay? And it continues to be lost to this day. Now, linguists and anthropologists and indigenous activists, we are running frantic race against time to record. First of all, record, and second of all, revitalize. Or at least help revitalize if that's what the people want. To record and revitalize this ancient knowledge, not just in Siberia, but again, all over the world. And if we don't act quickly, the Kets and the people like the Kets will never have the opportunity to enrich our world by sharing their knowledge and by extension, by sharing their language and by extension, the unique knowledge and way of life expressed thereby. Now, I am a firm believer that respect for Indigenous peoples is entailing respect for Indigenous languages. Okay, respect for Indigenous peoples entails respect for Indigenous languages. We cannot truly work in a way that respects and honors an Indigenous culture unless we approach it, quite literally, on its own terms. That is, giving the language the study and the respect that it deserves. Now, lots of people seem to think that learning Ket, or for that matter, Walpiri or Lakota, is in some way a less worthy endeavor than learning French or Chinese. But the fact is that all languages, even and perhaps especially the marginalized ones like Ket, have a lot to teach us and a lot to contribute to the human story. Despite what our culture tells us, the West is not perfect and all-knowing. It's only one cultural tradition among many. There are things modern science and history cannot tell us, but Indigenous knowledge can, from medical plant lore to even population genetics. Traditional Indigenous knowledge is just as multifaceted, just as useful, and just as worthy of study as Western science, and cannot be fully understood without the use of Indigenous languages, okay? Indigenous languages. By limiting ourselves to this small number of the most spoken language, let's put this on the board, the small number of most spoken languages, we are, in a sense, throwing away the vast majority of all human knowledge. Think about it like that. Only a few of the languages of the world have more than a few hundred or a few thousand speakers. So by limiting ourselves to these languages, we are throwing away the vast majority of human knowledge. And that's a tragedy. So I say, to arms, linguists, to arms. We rally to the banner of linguistic diversity. Let not this treasure slip from our grasp. Let not the foe of language extinction go unchallenged. Linguists, what is your profession? So, on that note, let's begin our study of cats.